So I want to do a video that I've been thinking about ever since I did this one video. It was a quick short and someone replied on it, DTS, TDS, TDS. They replied TDS, which stands for Trump Derangement Syndrome. And I wanted to make a quick video. Now, I've done an entire article on this subject before where I really dig deep into it. And I thought about just reading that article on one of these videos, but I decided I was just going to kind of freestyle it here and just say what I'm thinking about on this. So TDS. I want to go into what it is, what it isn't, why it's a thing, and why it really isn't an actual thing. So to begin with, TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, is, in theory, what a person suffers whenever they sit there and say this really good event was actually terrible just because it was the president who was the one that ended up doing it. Like, say he saved a puppy from a tree or something, and people are like, it was Trump doing it, it must have been terrible. Or, any kind of popular policy that is good for the overall country. Now, a lot of things get debatable as to whether or not it's good for the country or not, or, what the actual purpose behind certain things are. And so sometimes there's reasonable reasons to not like a particular policy. But if there is something that is objectively fairly good and you sit there and say, well, Trump did it, so it must be terrible, and that's like literally your only reason for opposing it, yeah, you probably suffer from the TDS. But the way people tend to use it is if I state a fact that has sources, that is provable, maybe even has statistics behind it, and you look at that fact and you say, well, that doesn't put the president in a good light, you must suffer from TDS. Okay, no, that's not what that is. But it seems to be the number one response on anything that states out actual facts that people mention about the president. Like if anyone says anything and there's no actual defense for it, someone will just come out with TDS, and then that's it. That's the only defense you need, right? You suffer from a derangement syndrome, and we all know Trump is working to put people that have certain derangement syndromes on a list. Now, what he's going to do with that list is up for speculation, but that's neither here nor there. Clearly, anyone who opposes Trump in any kind of way suffers from TDS. No, so that's not the proper use of it, but it is the most common use of it. So the proper use is, of course, as I stated earlier, he does something really great, and you suffer from TDS. Now, the reason that this is a little sketchy, I want to go into other aspects of this. So, you never suffer from ODS, Obama Derangement Syndrome, even though the whole idea that Thanks Obama was a whole meme for a long time where it was basically just parroting people that blame Obama for things that aren't even his fault in any kind of way. But we didn't say that they suffer from some sort of derangement syndrome. We just acknowledged the fact that there are some people that are going to hate a politician regardless of anything he does or doesn't do. Same thing with Biden. There were a lot of things. People sit there and say, Biden was some liberal extremist, but he was in reality probably the most conservative option that liberals were given for that election cycle. They sit there and say Obama was the most divisive president ever. Even while you have a president that loves to troll the libs, has frequently started utilizing the phrase Democrats. I never heard Obama sit there and say Republicans. Never heard that from him. Never heard him. I mean, we even have videos of him sitting there saying, well, this guy has an opposing idea. He's at my rally. Let's listen to what it is he's saying and let me address exactly what he's saying. That's what people consider to be very divisive for some reason. But I'm not here to argue who was most divisive or not. Well, I mean, I am, but not in this particular video. This video is about the DTS. So we've gone over what it is. We've gone over how people use it. We've gone over why, it's not necessarily a thing because, it should be used for every president if that's going to be the case. And it's not. It's only used for this one particular president. And it's used for this one particular president because he came out with it as a PR thing, and a very effective PR thing. Obviously, if you oppose me, if you're against me in any kind of way, it's because you suffer from a mental deficiency, not anything I've done. And we get this from a president that is notoriously known for not accepting accountability for literally anything he does. Which takes me into now why, if you do oppose something he does that even seems really great on the surface, and you're like, well, why wouldn't you oppose this? You have what I call the Nigerian prince principle. And that is, I've heard people sit there and say, well, if you ignore the fact that you hate Trump and that it's Trump doing this, if you look at the policy on its surface, on its own level, on its own merits, then how could you possibly oppose this policy? And I equate that with, if you take a Nigerian prince and you ignore everything you know about Nigerian princes, and you look at this email that's sitting there saying that if you give $1,000, you get back $10 million in return, how is that possibly a bad thing? Now, of course, you take into account the whole Nigerian prince thing where you know that it's a scam, then yes, the context ends up mattering. Now, let's apply that to Trump, where he has time and time and time again put in terrible policies that seem like they should have been good, but end up being corrupted in some form or fashion or another, and then end up more benefiting him or his other people. We have a great example with the reflecting pool in DC just recently, where it sounds like, how can you be opposed to us wanting to fix this national monument, this great thing? And you sit there and you think, well, because Trump is the one doing it. Well, then that's just TDS. Except now we see that there was a no-bid contract for a customer that supported him in prior times, and it ended up being done very poorly, very expensively, and now we're seeing it coming back in terrible ways. You know, I heard a lot of people defending the idea of going to Iran. And it's like, you know, we need the oil. We need to get control. There were a number of reasons that sounded decent on surface, but then you take into account the fact that you're having someone who has fired his top generals, his most experienced people, and is just going in basically without much of a plan, at least none that he's presented to anyone. We've been here before. We've done this kind of thing. We know how this turns out. And yet, here we are in the same position again. And because Trump was the one that was doing it, we knew it was going to turn out shit. And look at that, it's turned out shit. You learn from your experiences. You take the person that's doing the thing and you realize this is going to be done terribly because everything else he has done has been done terribly. This is the same man that wanted to remove Obamacare, which I'm not going to sit there and say Obamacare was absolutely perfect. You know, it obviously had a lot of problems and a lot of issues to work through, but I believe it did do more good than harm. I think it helped millions of people that couldn't get health insurance before, and they're now able to have health insurance. But he wanted to take that, and rather than sit there and say, well, what can we do to make this better? He said, well, we'll just remove it for now and then try to figure out and come up with something better later, which sounds terrible on every front. There's absolutely no point where that's good, unless you just absolutely hate Obamacare to that point where you think removing it completely and replacing it with nothing is probably the best way. But at that point, you're probably a little inhumane and don't need to be talking in these conversations to begin with. So that's why, even if a plan sounds good, there's still a lot of justification in hating it just because Trump is the one doing it. Because every time, and I've said this a couple of times, where I look at something he's done and I'm like, okay, this sounds actually really good. This could be a really good thing. I'm really hoping that this goes well. He came out with a policy not too long ago where he was dealing with a lot of, and I say policy, it's not really a policy that he did, but he was working with a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, and they were reducing their prices. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, that could be actually really good. Let's see how it turns out. I'm still a little skeptical because of who is actually doing it and how all the other things that he does turns out. I currently don't have anything against that whole pharmaceutical price point. I don't think it ended up being as great as he was trying to promote it to be, but I mean, that's typical politicians. You can't expect anything different from that, but he does it to the next degree. Neither here nor there. That's not the point here. I still expect it to turn into some kind of complete mess, but I have hope for it. There are some things he does that I have hope for that maybe the typical American can benefit from. Whether or not they do or will in the end, time will tell. But there is a strong history of reason to be skeptical of anything he does. And that's not TDS, that's just learning lessons from the past. So next time you want to use TDS as some sort of argument, think for a moment, is this actually TDS, or do I just not have an argument to dispute what I'm hearing? And I don't like it because it demeans the president that I like, regardless of how factual it might be. Maybe if we can start using it a little bit more accurately, a little bit more correctly, I won't be quite so quick to dismiss anyone who tries using it as being a complete and ignorant moron.